Good evening, everybody, and this is Rajshekhar, and I'll be moderating the webinar today, where we'll be focusing on the topic around benefits of revitalizing existing digitized ecosystems. And it's my immense pleasure to host this webinar and also introduce our dignitaries and speakers for this webinar today. So, start with we have J.A. Chaudhary, sir, who is the chairman of the Indian Blockchain Standards Committee.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening, sir. And Chaudhary sir has also served as the founding director of the Software Technology Parks of India, based in Bangalore. He was also one of the key architects for setting up the IT infrastructure ecosystem in Hyderabad and Secunderabad. He's also played a key role in setting up the FinTech Valley in Vizag, and also setting up the Primary Institute of Excellence in Digital Technologies at Tirupati. Um, JSR has also been the founding members of the Portal Player, which was responsible in designing and manufacturing the core silicon chip for the Apple iPods, which most of you are aware, which got acquired by the NV India Corporation, and he became the MD for NV India before starting his new edtech startup Talent Sprint. Later, Jay Sir was invited by the government of AP to advise the government for promoting the IT industry and infrastructure in the separated new Andhra Pradesh state. Also, is currently mentoring many startup companies in emerging technologies, and importantly, as the chairman of Blockchain Technology Standards Committee, is playing a key role in designing the new standards for blockchain technology under BIS and ISO. So it's a privilege to have you, sir, today for our webinar. Thank you for making time out to be present and sharing your valuable inputs.
Thank you, Rajshekhar.
Thank you, sir. The next speaker for us today, out of the three, is Mr. Randeep Sudan, who is the founder, board advisor, and former practice manager, the World Bank, and member of the Indian Administrative Services. So Randeep sir is the founder of Multiverse, a Singapore social enterprise that aims to leverage data and analytics and through AI to help governments, businesses, and individuals better anticipate and prepare for uncertain future. Randeep is also a board advisor at Ecosystem, a new age technology research and consulting firm. Randeep has served in senior positions at the World Bank from 2005 till 2018. He was the bank's international expert on digital strategy and government analytics. He also served as the head of World Bank's Global Digitalization Development Unit as its practice manager. In his capacity, he led an international team of experts to support developing countries on policies and programs relating to digital economy. And before joining World Bank, he was a senior member of the Indian Administrative Services. He helped Andhra Pradesh achieve prominence in digital government and becoming a key international destination for IT-based services. So it's again a great honor to have such a eminent speaker with broad experience and a lot of things that he's done around IT for our state and across world. Thank you again, Randeep sir, to be part of this evening and being a key speaker for this webinar. So last but not least, obviously, Apurva, who's been, I would say, a common friend and not a direct friend, though. It's good to see and connect with him through this platform. So Apurva is the executive director at EC Council, a young and dynamic professional who is a value creator and innovator and leads from the front. His professional life has been joyously challenging, and also tackling one mountain at a time or saving one sinking ship at a time. He's built years of experience to stand today with a plethora of invaluable knowledge and expertise to turn things around and fast. He builds high performing, value driven, result oriented teams that have developed to execute his visions and strategies. He has inspiring companies and troubled projects. He handled each of them strategically, which have become a great success story. In his earlier capabilities, he has served for DNB in Economic Analysis Group and for UBM India in conferences and business intelligence divisions. He's been instrumental in creating future leaders. Apart from work, he's a marathon runner and fitness freak. So,
Thank,
yeah,
thank you so much, Rajshekhar. Truly appreciate it. And look forward for this valuable discussion with the stalwarts as part of my panel discussion.
yeah, I totally agree, Purva. Like both of them, Jay sir and Randeep, have immense experience around digital space, and that's being our topic today. And more importantly, with the current changing situation, how technology and digitalization is really changing things across all spectrums of our life. So quickly, for everybody's benefit, I'll reiterate three topics that we'll be covering, and each of the speaker will be sharing their valuable inputs across these three topics. So the first one would be the education stack, changes that existing education systems needs to undergo, where I think most of us, at least with our families and kids, are going through this. Next, the other second most topic is the skill development, which is key for everybody again who are on the webinar or off the webinar, with a lot of things that changed during the pandemic. Definitely key, skill development and how we are going to use the digital technologies will influence our career growth. The last one is the technology trajectory that are forecasted in EdTech. Obviously, we'll definitely have to from all three of speakers with the experience they have in this particular EdTech space. So yeah, here I'll pause about the topics, but for the participants, yes, we'll be taking your questions. You can just post your questions there, and depending on the time, maybe at the end of each topic, or we'll park all the questions. Thank you, guys, and probably we'll quickly step into the discussions to start with the education stack. Changes that existing education systems need to undergo. Obviously, something important for all of our future generations. So I'll throw it to the panel, and Jay sir, would you like to pick and share your thoughts on this?
Sure. First of all, thanks, Sekar, for picking up a very, very important topic today, not only for India, entire globe. This is a very critical times. In fact, for the last one decade, lots of changes were happening in the technology, but in particular, digital space and digital education. And added to that, this COVID lockdown, they really pushed this to almost to a corner. And in the process, we are facing lots of issues, as you mentioned, the infrastructural issues and the content issues, and so many issues are happening. But what I noticed, the predominant issue which all of us have to really start looking at how quickly we can solve that issue is, today, I mean, the education is not able to catch up with the changes happening in the technology world or business world, whatever is happening. Education is no way we are able to catch up, particularly from Indian context point of view. And we are trying to bring some tinkering reforms here and there, but I don't think we are anywhere closer to what is really required. So with the result, if you don't really attempt to bring those changes, what will happen? You just, I mean, fast forward few years from now, all the other kids around the globe, probably they are able to get good jobs, they're able to earn money, to virtual jobs or whatever it is. Whereas with 1.3 billion population, if our kids are not able to really look at those virtual jobs and download those jobs and make some living, then they'll all become unemployed youth. The so-called digital dividend for India, all the politicians and everybody is talking about India advantage is digital. The dividend is the demographic dividend is the age. So that demographic dividend, we may lose advantage and it may become a demographic disaster. So my point of the views at this point of time is we need to quickly bring some players. I think we don't have to depend only what government is going to do. Let's not wait till the government wakes up and do something. My request to whoever is participating in this panel, all of us are responsible. If we don't, attempt to think what is that we need to do, can we solve this problem? If we don't solve the problem, the whole country, the whole youth, will become a liability for the nation. So that's where I've been talking to people like Randeep Sudan and Professor Karen and so many people at the school education. Even in the higher education also, we dabbled with a technology company called Talent Sprint. When we invested in the Talent Sprint, and I saw how disconnected most of the educational institutions, particularly engineering colleges, university students, they're totally disconnected. And the life cycles are getting shortened every day, every minute, along with the technology changes. So that's the reason why I don't want to really talk about the higher education. At least if we are able to bring some quick reforms in the primary education, that's where the youth, the current youth, actually, they have a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of passion, a lot of capabilities. But what happens if that energy is diverted in the wrong direction? If the parents are not having time to direct them properly, and they're throwing some digital gadgets to them. I have seen, I've been living in my village almost for the last 12 months. I know many employees who are working with the technology industry in Bangalore or Hyderabad or Chennai. They all returned back to my village, and they were both the wife and husband, both of them were working. And they say that they got overloaded with the work, and they are not able to find any time to guide their children. So with the results, what they're doing is most of them, they're giving their gadgets with their iPads or whatever the digital infrastructure, and ask their children to listen to that e-classes and all that. And most of the children, their attention span is not there. They're not. I used to observe some of the kids who are their parents are working in my farm, and they do the both video audio mute, and they do something else, and they are not even listening to what the teacher is telling at that point of time. So all these things are happening. Attention spans are getting lessened. They're not even 5 minutes. If there is a talk like this, they don't have that 5 minutes attention span. So that's one observation. Second observation is when I came back to Hyderabad, I stayed with my daughter, and my daughter has got two kids. Both of them are sons. One is 5 years, the other one is 8+. The 5-year kid, whenever I go to their home, he grabs my iPhone and starts downloading some games. And every half an hour he comes, Tata, show me your face. Then when I show my face, he will download another game. And again, after half an hour, again he comes, again the same. Then I was asking him, what is that you're doing? No, Tata, I'm getting bored. This game is not good. That's why I want to download the other. So that means even the games are also, their attention span is very less. So this is the world today we are tackling with. So if this is the kind of students are coming into the school education or higher education, if the lecturer starts talking even for 10 minutes, whatever the greatness about the teacher or lecturer, I don't think people are going to listen to them. So that's where, I've been talking to my friend, Mr. Randeep Sudan, to look for any solution. In fact, we had several WhatsApp conference calls with Randeep. Fortunately, Randeep used to pay patience, attention in all those WhatsApp conference calls. My objective was, can we find a solution to gamify all the basics of learning, any mathematics basics or physics basics, science basics, so that, I mean, while playing the game, they're able to get the concepts clear. Once they get the concepts clear, they will be able to learn through the Eklavya kind of education. The other good feedback, what I want to give, my second grandson, who is 8+ years old, and I noticed he is actually developing some robots, not only the software robot. He's actually created some model. He wants me to buy one 3D printer, which is a low-cost 3D printer, which is about 40,000. He wants to print this thing and put a Raspberry Pi into it, and I already started programming C and Python language. He's very confident what he wants to do, how he wants to go about, and with very little kind of a direction. So the main thing, what happened to him is, there are a couple of kids of the same age group, and there is one mentor by name Shivram. He is the founder, CEO of a company called Caltech, based out of Bangalore. And every Sunday, he gives about 1 or 2 hours to guide these children what to do, how to do, what are the basic using IoT and all that. They are really driven, and they're able to really do wonders without a teacher telling any of these things. So I'm coming to a point that instead of blaming government, blaming XYZ institutions and all that, maybe we have a lot of mentors, technology mentors, business mentors, government also. I mean, a lot of good quality mentors are available. If only we can give that kind of a time what Shivram is doing. Each mentor can mentor about 10-15 kids. I think probably that may be the solution. That's what I'm thinking. Now I'll pause at this point of time. Maybe Ranjit Puda and others can comment upon.
Yes, and I think there's one interesting thing you picked. One side is about the mentors or teachers. The whole gambit has changed. Who impart the knowledge. Coming to the other one, most important thing is the kids' ability to just hang on, or not being able to focus, changing on even on the games. So I think that's most important thing for us to capture their attention. They learn. And like Chaudhary sir said, Randeep sir, what do you think about how we can tackle and make education more enriching for the kids?
Thank you very much, Rajshekhar. And what Mr. J. Chaudhary mentioned, of course, is very much on target, as it is always with him. So I have been reflecting on this subject as to how should the education system adapt to these fast changing technologies and changing attention spans, which were also highlighted as part of Mr. Chaudhary's comments. So one thing which I feel might be a way forward, or one approach might be useful in this context, is actually to go to those platforms which learners find very attractive. So I'll give an example. Now, a lot of people use TikTok. It's a very sort of engaging and very fun application. Of course, this TikTok, I don't know what is the status of this application in India, because I think previously there was some issues on banning it. But nonetheless, there might be other applications like TikTok. Now, if you look at TikTok, the hashtag learn on TikTok currently has more than 7 billion views. There are teachers like Miss James, who has a hashtag, I am the English teacher. She began posting TikTok grammar lessons to help her middle school students. And that particular, those particular lessons have more than 1.6 million followers. Now, the reason that a platform like TikTok is doing so well in terms of education is because it is fun, it is engaging, and it's a choice. People go there for the love of the subject and not for a certificate or course credit. Of course, I'm not saying that TikTok is the solution to the educational problem, because in 60 seconds, which is the time that you have a TikTok video, you cannot really get a full-fledged education or deeper skills. Training is impossible. But nonetheless, the point is that perhaps as educators, we should try to see or analyze which are the platforms which the youth and which kids find very attractive, and perhaps leverage and curate content which is available on those platforms to be able to do better on education. So that's just one example. Now let's look at another example of a platform, Roblox, which is a gaming platform. It debuted on the New York Stock Exchange just last month and is valued over $40 billion. Now, Roblox is not just a gaming company. It is also a virtual playground for nearly 200 million monthly users, 2/3 of which are of school-going age. And this platform has partnered with 300 partner educational institutions. And in fact, when Roblox was debuted in China, the platform was promoted primarily for its educational benefits, not so much for gaming. In 2020, just last year, there were 345,000 content creators on Roblox. And the payouts were as high as $250 million. Now, teachers have started using Roblox for pre-built templates to customize, games and levels and tutorials for students. Its concept is learn as you play. The approach is very entertainment and play oriented. And teachers are increasingly adopting Roblox to teach subjects like coding, animation, and even civility in a digital space. Now, that's another example of a platform which is primarily a gaming platform, but could be leveraged for education. So I feel that one approach might be to do the initial analytics to see which are the platforms which are most attractive and where the youth and kids spend the maximum amount of their time, and perhaps leverage those platforms and curate educational content on those platforms to be able to capture the imagination and the interest of these students and translate gaming and other such modes into an educational experience. So that's one. Secondly, I also feel that there may be an opportunity, especially in the developing world, across the globe, to leverage open source solutions which might help to develop content and to then be able to monitor and be able to deliver that content in a much smarter way. So I know that Mr. Nandan Nilekani, who is one of the original founders of one of India's highly respected companies, Infosys, he set up a foundation called the Ekstep Foundation. And this foundation has developed a series of solutions which are in the nature of microservices and which is called as the education stack. And this stack is open source. There's a collaboration with the MIT, and an organization called sunbird.org was established to be able to propagate and to share this piece of technology infrastructure with educators around the world so that it becomes possible to build content, to contribute content, and to rapidly use technology in the education space. So this platform, for example, or this stack has an infrastructure layer, there's a knowledge layer, content layer, there's a measurement layer, and there's an AI-based personalization layer, and of course, a solutions layer. So I feel that there might be opportunities to leverage open source, leverage those platforms which are attracting a large number of students and youth and people who would benefit from education, and have an approach which is more iterative, more adaptive, and approach which goes with the flow, so to speak, and leverages interest and building blocks from various ecosystems to deliver a high quality educational content to students. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, sir. And probably Apurva, just while I move this needle towards you, so there's one very good point that one of our participants raised. So how about some spreading things around how Ranjit Sinha Disale, the teacher who got Global Teacher Prize recently, where he kind of did the QR code and the textbooks in different languages, easily accessible. And yeah, you've been mostly like a pioneer in a lot of ideas. So how do you think the education stack could be adjusted to meet our current generation requirements?
So I think thank you, Raj. I think wonderful insights by Mr. Randeep Sudan and by Mr. Jay Chaudhary. I think two veterans from the industry who have built a state the policies point of view. I think a couple of points which I would like to talk out here is that day in day out when I talk to universities, right? So one of the key challenges what we see is that the students have to recognize the fact the world has changed. And this world is not going to come back what we have seen 2 or 3 years back. Hence, a lot of perception still lies in the mind of people that, okay, COVID is going to go back, we're going to go back. No. I think the students in universities, which especially the graduates who are passing out, are realizing the fact right now, this is going to be their way of life as we go forward. Europeans and US economies and the students communities have understood this fact because they're not going to go back ever. Hence, one critical component what EC Council does a lot of surveys, and I've also, in my role of talking to a lot of deans, we found out that skilling is a huge challenge which is going to come in front of the student community right now. See, if you see about 8 years back, and my veteran panelists will know more better than me out here, is that there was a concept US and the European countries started was a finishing school concept, which meant that there was a clear divide between the needs of the industry vis-a-vis the students who are passing out, right? Fortunately, India was catching it up, and that is the critical need of the hours. The graduates who are going to pass out need to really reskill from the jobs point of view. If you really ask me, the present industry, there are plenty of jobs, but the challenge is the skilling level. How the universities are going to adapt in terms of the skilling angle, how to make the students ready. When I say ready, I think Mr. Jay Chaudhary sir said a brilliant point in terms of, are the university looking at moving in the new economy point of view? Because you're still talking about the coding, the traditional jobs, but then if you talk about the new trends of job hirings which are happening globally, it's completely changed in the last 6 years. Hence, I think the largest challenge or what the universities of India need to do is how do you upskill massive amount of students? That would be the biggest challenge, and universities who do this will be moving ahead. I think that's what my thought process would be.
Okay, can I comment here, Purva?
Yes, sir. Please.
In the higher education, we try to do some improvements by talking to universities like Bharatiya University in Coimbatore. So there, the Vice Chancellor was so proactive, though it's a government-owned university, almost 100 years old university. And whatever suggestions industry gave, he immediately accepted those suggestions. And today they're able to run a 2-year cyber security program entirely driven by the industry. And industry is giving the case studies. Industry is making the students to build the SOC security operations centers, and they're getting the complete knowledge. At the same time, the university professors gave the first semester, gave the fundamentals of some theoretical foundation to the students. And the second semester onwards, they're all industry-driven projects. And now there's going to be huge demand for those students who are going to come out of the MSc program. So my belief is like Indian School of Business, they introduced the 1-year compressed MBA, which is fully residential. and they are much better than all other 2-year MBAs in the country and outside the country also. So what is required today is we have to put all the students into a pressure cooker mode. I keep giving this example that the coal or any tree or something falls because of the earthquake or whatever into the inner core of the earth. Over a period of time, because of the high pressure, the same the tree gets converted into coal. Coal gets compressed, and some coal may become rare elements like the gold, silver, and all that. Some of those carbon elements may become even diamonds. So I was giving this analogy. Unless you put the same ISB model, when you talk to ISB student, go there and no, I don't have time. Even Saturday, Sunday, everything is busy. So many assignments are given, and they don't have any breathing time. I think we need to create that kind of a the pressure cooker mode for these students, and we don't require the 4-year, 5-year engineering, 3-year degree program. 1 year is good enough if they can understand the basics, and on top of that, second year if he works on the industry problem driven by the industry, I think most of the higher education the institutions can produce the best of the best talent, and they can compete with anybody around the globe, because our people are really good in adapting to any new technology better than their counterparts from US or Europe or Australia. So that is the kind of approach we have to bring in the higher education, Purva. That's
Absolutely.
my thought process.
No, I think very well said, sir. And I think you have raised a brilliant point, is that I think since I've witnessed and I've been to Bharatiya University, I think it was your visionary board which actually created the growth map for the entire university. I think that's a classic case study where there was a need, the university moved forward, and they entirely collaborated with the private without almost zero commercials. The private came on board because they wanted a ready-made student community, and here everyone was placed. Or they're looking for, I think that's a brilliant public-private participation. That's what we say nowadays.
Yeah, I think we need to bring such innovative models instead of waiting for Government of India or AICT to come with some reforms, may come after 5 years, 10 years. I don't think people can wait, or industry can wait for those things to happen. I think industry has to jump in for their own benefit. If the industry is not able to get the right kind of manpower, do you think they will survive in this technology, ever-changing technology world? They can't. Raw material is the bright people. I think industry has to step in. All of us have to step in. Let's not just keep on commenting that university system is bad, XYZ is bad and all that. I think it is our responsibility. We have to take the ownership. We have to get into the driver's seat. There definitely is a lot of solutions we can find. Like Mr. Randip Sudhan gave a lot of very good the pointers how we can bring those changes using those TikTok kind of a thing, or what is the other one you said, Randip, which is
Roblox.
Roadblocks.
Roadblocks. ROBLOX.
Roblox. Okay. So
yes.
This information has to be given, publicized to the people. Let the people pick up these things, and parents, they themselves, they don't have to even worry about what teachers in the school or college are going to teach. They can pick up these leads and make sure their kids are having all the right kind of inputs and tools with them. Then automatically, I think one need not have to worry about whether they are going to the school or college. What will happen if this pandemic continues for 3-4 years? Let's not worry about those things. Let's all try to find out what are the quick solutions which are already being implemented, and those things have to be that awareness program. I'm really thankful to all the people who are bringing this kind of webinars. This is very, very important. Unless if you conduct this kind of webinars, and how common people will come to know that this kind of tools are available, this is happening in US, this is happening elsewhere and all that. I think I really appreciate. My only request to all the management team who are organizing these webinars, let these webinars be a result oriented or outcome oriented. There's so many webinars these days. I mean, diamond dozen webinars. Nobody wants to attend any of the webinars because same thing is being talked about n number of times. All the information is already available. If you Google, everything is available. My suggestion to the people who are organizing these webinars have to be outcome based. So, for example, today, whatever the knowledge that you are picking up from the panelists, if you can actually summarize and publicize, have one more webinar, maybe 1 month later and all that, this thing, taking these inputs and taking other college management or school management, what is that they can do using this, this is something result oriented, action oriented thing. If it is possible, then we are really solving the, otherwise we'll only be talking about, oh, this is the problem, that is the issue, that is the issue. I mean, nobody's doing that. Let's not getting into that kind of a criticism mode. Let us get into action oriented, result oriented, solving the problem for the country.
Yeah, absolutely, Chaudhary sir. Like while I set up the contest, I clearly said we'll definitely make that efforts to curate all these thoughts and obviously look at actionable things that we can do as an industry perspective, and also try to build on this to discuss more and impart more knowledge for ourselves and other people. But consciously or unconsciously, already we've steered to the second topic when Apurva picked up the skill development, and one of our respondents clearly said that yeah, e-learning is definitely a powerful tool, but it all falls back on how effectively we're implementing the online learning for the students. And obviously, like Apurva said, it's about even the skill development for the people who are imparting, and also people who are actually taking the knowledge. So in this scenario, the whole stakeholders in the ecosystem will play that important role, where we can have a robust skill development and learn e-learning where key knowledge is imparted properly. So Randeep sir, just who do you think would be our key stakeholders, and how do you think these people should be really building on for a more effective skill development phase in digital learning space?
So thank you very much. This is an interesting question and a very important one, and I thank Mr. Apurva Kumar for raising it. Now, I feel that the skills training piece perhaps has to be looked at in two dimensions. So one dimension is that we need to understand what are the foundational shifts that are taking place to be able to then be able to predict to some extent, and to be able to understand what skills are trending up, what skills are trending down, and what are the areas where we should be focusing. Now, this is something which requires sophisticated analytics. There are companies like Burning Glass based in Boston, which does this for a living. There are companies like EMSI. There's a company called JobCred in Singapore, which is doing this. And there are companies like LinkUp, which is also in this space. Now, they are into this in terms of labor market analytics. So basically what they're looking at is you identify what are the skills in demand from job postings, from gig platforms, and also understand what are the foundational shifts that are taking place in the economy and technologies. And to that extent, be able to map in a predictive sense, what skills are important and should be an area of focus. So that's one part, which is just understanding the dynamics and the market dynamics of skills. The second part, and that is something which Mr. J. Chaudhary mentioned earlier, is how do we make this connection between jobs and skills in a sense which is just in time, because one can keep planning for, skills which may emerge in the future. But often when companies are hiring people, there's an opportunity there to rapidly reskill or rapidly skill people and, make them ready for jobs in companies. Now, on that, I feel that the whole development of XR technologies will make a big difference in this space. So I'll just give an example. Actually, if you look at virtual reality technologies, Just if you look at the figures, PricewaterhouseCoopers did a study and they found that using virtual reality, employees could be trained 4 times faster, and the employees were 275% more confident in applying their skills learned after training. They were 3.75 times more emotionally connected to the content they had learned and 4 times more focused during their training. Now, the fact that this is a powerful tool has started being used by companies like Walmart. So Walmart uses VR training for its employees, for example, in advance of Black Friday. And Walmart has a particular place in each Walmart store where you can go and return stuff that you have bought, or you can ask for a refund. It used to take 8 hours of training to train staff to man that particular function in Walmart. Using virtual reality, that training period has been reduced from 8 hours to 15 minutes. Now just look at the acceleration in learning and in skilling using these technologies. So I have always been a proponent that a country like India and much of the developing world should think of leapfrogging in this space by taking up a program of creating digital twins. So there are countries like the UK which have started a national strategy on digital twins. But I personally feel that if we are able to digitize objects, cities, processes, people, it will become possible to do skilling in a completely different manner and in a way that can be completely fast-tracked. So Singapore, for example, I'll take an example from Singapore. They have these electrical substations, and you need an engineer to go and do maintenance on a particular substation. Now, using augmented reality, you don't need an engineer to do that. And that person may not be as expert and may not be as skilled as would otherwise be necessary, but this person can go there and can be guided and can be able to carry out certain tasks which otherwise were not possible. So I feel that a program which allows the use of these technologies would go a long way in skilling, reskilling, and upskilling just in time. So just imagine if you have autonomous cars coming up in the future and drivers become unemployed, or if artificial intelligence starts replacing a large number of people from employment, you will need a liquid workforce which can adapt and can be reconfigured to tasks which are becoming important with changing technologies. And that reconfiguration of the workforce and the rendering of workforce as a liquid workforce will become much easier if we pursue a coherent and long-term strategy on digital twinning. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. It's really insightful. And probably Apurva, because you picked on skill development, I thought I'll throw.
No, I simply love the points which Mr. Randeep has actually mentioned out here. So I'll actually take about 5 minutes. I'll explain here, Raj and Jay sir and Randeep sir. This is that. See, since I've been in the content industry for last 14, 15 years now, I've seen how evolution of the content has happened. To give an example of my present company, EC Council, right? So EC Council's flagship certification always has been ethical hacking, pen testing, cybersecurity certifications. But we have seen the complete trend changing, which means that there was a time where people used to sit in a classroom for 9 hours into 4 days, which means 36 hours of rigorous training. And they used to get a certification for a X amount of a skill set, which could mean Python programming, cybersecurity, ethical hacking, or it can be any kind of a Java scripts. But now what we're actually seeing is that, and from a corporate point of view, taking for Mr. Randeep, said now people looking at for a certain skill set which needs for a time and for a job requirement. People are no longer bothered, or even a corporate or a hiring manager is no longer looking for a large skill set. He's saying, here is a need. I need Python programming. Here are the 100 students which need to go in 3 hours. Can you deliver? And I think that is where the entire industry's makeshift has changed in about a decade, where we spoke about a year back, master of, many skills, the fundamental logic we all were taught in school, right? You know, you need to have one skill set training, you know, focus on one. No. Now, if you really say you need to have small skill sets, multiple of them, and that is the biggest game changer. And I think Jay sir already spoke about it. That is where the collaboration with the public-private will immensely help the students. Imagine if I am a university and I have 4,000 students passing out of engineering this year. But a typical psychology in the students is that I will have a CISO, I will have a Cisco labs, I will have a Microsoft labs, and 3-4 labs. I'll get them trained. But imagine a scenario, you know, a public-private collaboration has 40-50 courses being offered at literally at dirt prices. Imagine the skill set ready a student will have, which are basically calibrated to the industry needs. If the industry needs cloud computing, and here is a private player who can provide a cloud computing from a 15 minutes or a 1 month course, and boom, your student is ready. So hence, if you really ask me, the entire marketplace of the courses has completely changed. Now, even industry is not looking for a vision of a 1 year, 2 year. Industry is only looking at a vision of, here is a project I need to deliver in 2 months. I need 100 students. Can the student do? If they're ready, come on board, take the project. That would be my thought. Rajshekhar.
Rajshekhar, I think Randeep gave a new definition for the workforce, liquid workforce. I like that liquid workforce. Can we have one webinar only on the liquid workforce? How do we create that? What are the tools required? What are the case studies? I'll give recently one case study. One employee he used to work for me in Portal Player. Later on, when Portal Player got acquired by NVIDIA, and he used to do very well in that company even after the acquisition. But recently, he told me that all the support jobs, network jobs are either outsourced to somebody or getting automated. And I told him, why don't you shift to cybersecurity? The last 3 months, he learned a lot of tools in the cybersecurity. Today, is already working in cybersecurity. I think unless you bring this new concept of liquid workforce, because things are changing so rapidly, we don't know which is going to be relevant tomorrow or day after tomorrow. Unless we have that kind of a mindset, keep on looking at new things and keep changing. You should be ready to mold yourself like Corona is transforming, and now it is somewhere I was told in one of the African countries, 30 times mutation has happened. Like that, I mean, we have to mutate ourselves into the new world, and otherwise you are irrelevant. I think we need to have one webinar only on this liquid workforce, Rajshekhar. I think let Randeep Sudan be the key speaker in that.
Definitely, Jay sir. I think that word is something really caught my attention as well, and probably we'll definitely see. And we already have one actionable item from our discussions in just 50 minutes. But considering our time, probably just to squeeze in our last thought, which again is a very wide topic, which again we can have as a separate discussion later. But maybe quickly, if each of you can let us know what you think could be the technology trajectory that is forecasted in the EdTech, with most importantly with all the things that have changed in last 12 months. Definitely there is a lot of disruption. So what is the trajectory that you forecast in EdTech?
For me, I don't think anybody can really give any answer that this is going to be the trajectory. The trajectory is changing so fast. I think we have to mold our minds to suit any trajectory and be there in that kind of a path. So something, I don't know. I don't have any answer. Maybe Mr. Sudan can give some inputs.
This is, of course, it's $1 million question as to what is the future. And it is very difficult to be able to predict the future. But, one might be able to create certain scenarios. So when you talk to a futurist, typically they don't talk in terms of a fixed sort of trajectory. They look at it in terms of possible scenarios. So let's look at the future long term, maybe 10 years out, which is the time horizon which is normally used for horizon scanning. I feel that we might benefit from learning from science fiction to some extent as to where the future might be heading, because often what is an idea in science fiction becomes reality after a certain period of time. So there was a book written by Neil Stevenson called Snow Crash. That was a novel written in 1992. And Neil Stevenson, for the first time, described the concept of a metaverse. So a metaverse is a persistent virtual reality space. And that was the part, which was very interesting in that novel. Now, I feel that we are slowly likely to move in a direction where the analog world will increasingly get digitized, and the virtual and the analog worlds will merge in some sense. Now, as that happens, so 10 years out maybe, the way that education might be delivered would be very different. And we can see some of the signals already. So if you look at a company like Spatial.io, it has started holding virtual meetings in virtual space. Now, I feel that it may happen that you would be able to get people from different parts of the world and be able to learn things together and learn in a virtual space, which allows for certain things to be made available virtually. So just look at Microsoft HoloLens. Though it costs $3,500 today, but it allows you to look at and work together, maybe on an engine prototype, or maybe on a piece of design for a living room. Now, I feel that these technologies, which are expensive today, will become cheaper as time goes on. And we may find that the whole concept of pop-up enterprises, which is that algorithms quickly assemble teams of people, and these teams use virtual reality and are assembled in a metaverse to be able to address problems and do learning in a just-in-time mode. So that's the long term, maybe 10 years out. In the short term, I feel that this immersive learning experiences will become more and more important. And already we are having technologies which are starting to change how education is delivered, and increasingly use of immersive learning experiences, hybrid learning, peer-to-peer learning. These models, I think, will continue to take off. In the medium term and medium to the long term, I feel that the direction that we are likely to be heading is that the youth are not just interested in doing something for a living. That is not the purpose of life in some sense. And one may have to go back in a little bit in terms of philosophy, that the direction which people may like to take is something like Clayton Christensen from the Harvard University. He wrote a book, How Will You Measure Your Life? So the ethical dimensions, the dimensions of what does life mean? Where is the planet heading? What is it that we can have an impact on this world, will become factored into education much better than what it is today. So if you look at Gartner, it calls a voice of society metric to become common as part of companies. And if you look at even the recent educational institutions which have been put in place, for example, France has an AI Vancity School for Technology, Business and Society. That school focuses not just skills in AI and management, but also on ethics. So I feel that the educational system will have to go in a direction which is much more focused on purpose, on planet, on people, and would also integrate some of these trends and technologies to provide a completely different, or at least somewhat different type of education going forward. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I would like to add on, Rajsekhar, what Randeep just now mentioned. I think for any building, the foundation is very, very important. If only we are able to build that kind of a foundation, fundamental education while the child is going through the primary education before he gets into the higher education. If that foundation is laid properly through whatever Randeep said, immersive education, gamification, whatever, if he's able to understand the basics properly, where these fundamentals are properly applicable in what kind of domain scenarios they're applicable, if they're able to get that practical insight into that thing, then afterwards, no matter which technology, whatever hardware changes, software changes, operating system changes, the whole world, whatever changes happens, they will be able to, meet up to those challenges. They will find a solution the same, as long as they have a strong fundamental foundation that has to be strongly, taught to them in the primary education. I think that's where now our entire concentration has to be. Recently, we have been in touch with Professor Karen from Seattle. He's working on neural education. He says some of the schools in Seattle area, he has experimented this technology. Using the technology, he is introducing the open book system. Let the students take the Google computer, textbook, whatever to the examination hall, and the kind of questions that posed them in, it doesn't matter that he has got the information, but how that information can be used to solve a particular application in a very innovative, that's where the measurement of the students understanding all that. I think we have to head towards that kind of an open book examination and introducing the cognitive learning, neural learning. How do we increase the working memory of the child? How we can do the multitasking. It's just not, if I learn cybersecurity, I can get a job and all that. What happens? There's this saturation in cybersecurity. Then what? So one should have those kind of mental abilities to take on any new challenges. That's where I think we need to prepare our the next young generation. I can't really comment upon the higher education because sometimes I feel that it is going beyond repair. That's what my thinking at this point of time.
Definitely, Zilla. I think this is another actionable for us. Maybe looking at how the education can be still programmed even with digitalization, keeping the basics, keeping the ethics and values intact. But I know we're on time, but probably quickly, Apurva, what do you think?
So I think beautifully summarized by Mr. Randeep Sudhan. I think I'll only add 2-3 points out here based on my feedback of talking to multiple universities globally. We see 3 key changes or 3 trends emerging. One, the world is completely moved to a capex to an opex model. Every service, every online will be an opex model. There'll nothing be on a capital expenditure, which is completely ruled out. Number 2, what we see is staff augmentation. I think we are seeing as EC Council, we are seeing the most senior most roles, right from a CEO level coming on a contract, on a project level. So hence the students have to come out of the mindset like 2 years down and they're going to be a fixed job. I think every job eventually will be on a rotating basis. I have a project, I have a deadline, finish it, you move ahead. Number 3 trend, what we clearly see is capsule learning, which clearly means that fundamentally the need for large courses, textbooks are all gone. Small courses, need of the hour, finish it. You have the skill set, you have the job, project, finish it, move out. This 3, we see clearly the trend moving forward. That's it.
Yeah, thank you, Apurva. Maybe another thing, maybe for us looking at actionable, where I'll pick staffing augmentation and obviously being jack of all would be the most important thing.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct.
In the market going forward, but I think we've almost come to the end. But if 3 of you still have maybe a couple of minutes or 5 minutes, maybe to be precise, we can see if anybody has a couple of questions before we can close the session.
Rajsekhar, before you get those questions, can you summarize all the discussions today and send us the summary so that if at all you have a follow-on webinar, at least we can go to the next level?
Definitely, sir. So the idea is we'll curate, consolidate the key points that is discussed, and also we'll append maybe the top 3 or 4 actionables, like you said, maybe as a next series of discussions that we'll definitely have around this particular topic. Maybe not exactly this, like a few things which we said we'll still see as the actionable items.
Yeah, I want some tangible outcome to come out, Rasekhar. Otherwise, it's like apply, no reply, kind of a, it should not end up like
no.
that.
That's where I said we curate, consolidate, but also put 3 actionable items. We'll be more than happy how much you can get involved. So it will be easy for us to take that forward.
I think one point I forgot to mention here, I think one of the biggest example, Mr. Randeep and Mr. Jay, I think since for 17 years, I know Mr. Ravi Kumar, who runs this company, right? A classical example out here. He's a CEO of this company, right? Like me, I taken an easy way out. I've moved in, I joined a company, but look at this man, right? He has started his own company, come out of comfort zone. Now he's hiring people outside, right? I think world or probably India needs more entrepreneur like Ravi, honestly. And that's where the entire changes of EdTech is changing, right? Young entrepreneurs who are coming and making a huge difference. That's massive, according to me.
I agree.
Thanks, Apurva.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I think we already have a solution around one of these things that students have picked around virtual spaces. St. Maxim already has a virtual lab kind of a setup where people can interact and learn. But yeah, keeping time in mind, so just wanted to check if anybody on the call has any questions. Maybe you could just raise your hand and we can unmute for you to pose the question. Because a few questions were already posted, I kind of put that across while we were speaking. So there is one question which says, I think it's from Sai, which says, what is the future for students who are pursuing or want to pursue sustainability studies? So I'll leave it to either of you who want to pick this question.
Maybe Mr. Sudan?
Yes, so just yesterday I was interacting with somebody named Senthil, and he has created a platform called Youth Hub. He started with New Zealand, youthhub.co.nz. But he has taken that platform to the next level, and he has linked the sustainability development goals of the United Nations. As you know, there are 17 such goals. And this has been linked with certain actions that you can take on each of those goals, which gives you some badges of honor, so to speak, and also builds a track record of performance on each of those dimensions. So this platform, this revised platform should be out very soon. But I feel that might be an interesting approach if you can quantify certain things that can be done with respect to sustainability and with respect to the sustainability development goals of the United Nations. That might be a good way forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I think we don't see any more questions coming in. But maybe specifically this question can go to you, Jay sir. So there is one person asking an opinion on cancelling the board examinations for 10th class. Is that a good thought?
I think my thought process is today, the highest priority for everybody is the health. Even if you lose 1 year in the entire span of the individual's this thing, we are not going to lose anything. But if something happens to the health, suppose somebody gets into corona infection and he brings that home, then all the old people or other children gets impacted. Today, there are no beds available in any hospital. And a lot of people are calling me to recommend to one hospital to get, I am not able to get them. Then where do they go? So highest priority is health. Even if they postpone 1 year, heavens are not going to fall.
Sir, I think We're almost at the end. I think we've already overran. And yes, there are a couple of questions just been posted. Maybe we'll try to curate and share with you, all of you, maybe, and you can, the speakers can come up with those answers, because we've already run out of the time. Just keeping that in mind. So there are a couple of questions that have come in late, and we'll reach out to you posting those questions, Apurva, Sudan sir, and Jay sir, and probably if you can share, and then we'll
absolutely no problem.
Sure.
But I think this has been an enriching discussion for me. So a lot of things, especially the liquid labor, is something very interesting for me. And a couple more actionable items which we discussed. We'll share with all of you the keynotes, what has been discussed, and what is the actionables we foresee from these discussions will be shared with all of us on this call very shortly. But thank you, Jay sir, thank you, Randeep sir, and thank you, Apurva. Really, first of all, your time, and most importantly, your knowledge and your experience and insights are really invaluable. Thank you so much.
We should really thank Mr. Sudan. It must be too late for him in the night.
Yes,
in spite of that, he's still awake and answering all the questions. Thank you, Mr. Randeep Sudan.
No, thank you. And I enjoyed this session. It was a learning experience for me as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. Have a good evening.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you so much once again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.